Oh, hi there. This is a video response to JJR Global, whatever that is, who who has swallowed the Kool-Aid on a typical NeoCon line, who's telling us that, quote, the New Deal didn't work. Now, if you're wondering about what to say when one of your friends tries to sell you this, we're going to be using the NeoCons' worst enemy, data, to prove that the New Deal did indeed work. The graph you're looking at represents GDP during the period from 1929 to 1940 in the United States. The blue line represents GDP in fixed $2,000, thereby taking into account effects of inflation/deflation. Now the thick black line is when FDR takes office. Now note, from 1929 to 1933, that line is heading one direction, and that is down. In fact, from 1929 onward, we have lost approximately 25% of the value of the economy. Now, right after Roosevelt gets in office, that line turns around and starts climbing. And when we see that by 1937, the GDP has in fact recovered to the point where it was at before the Depression started. Yeah, so tell me again how this isn't working. Now, this is the graph representing the unemployment rate. Now, the numbers that JJR are using, no doubt, are represented by the dotting line, which is the, quote, unofficial unemployment rate. The only problem is that this rate doesn't take into account the people who are millions of people who are employed in FDR's public works program. The solid line takes that into account. Now, as we can see, in 1933, the official unemployment rate is around 25%. The true unemployment rate stands at 21%. Immediately, now the official unemployment rate is still climbing. The adjusted rate has started to drop a bit, probably due to Hoover's lackluster attempts at a public works program of his own. But after Roosevelt takes office, both those numbers drop, and to the point that 1937 unemployment, the true unemployment rate, is around 9%, not 15% as JJR claims. Now, no doubt, you'll note the other black line represents the 1938 recession. This is what JJR and the other neocons like to harp about as so-called evidence that the New Deal doesn't work. JDR will of course say, well, look at what happened in 1938. Unemployment went up, the GDP also went down, therefore the New Deal doesn't work. Actually, the data actually proves the opposite. What happened in 1938 was that FDR looked at the data, saw that the numbers were improving, and came to the conclusion that the economy was strong enough to stand on its own. So, against the advice of the New Deal economists, he decided to eliminate the federal deficit and try to move into a balanced budget by cutting down the New Deal programs. And the result was an immediate depression. A recession within a depression. Now, FDR, after a year, quickly realized his mistake and reinstated the New Deal to its back into full strength. Again, at the graph, we see that after the 1938 recession, the unemployment rates, both the official and the adjusted, steadily dropped again. In fact, by 1940, they pretty much has completely recovered, and right now they're at the same level they were at in 1937. And they continue to drop right to the bottom of the graph at 1942, where we're seeing an unemployment rate, a true unemployment rate of around 3%. Now here we see the GDP graph again, looking at what happens with GDP during the 38 recession. Again, you see 1938 the GDP does indeed drop by about 3.4%. But after FDR reinstates the New Deal, the GDP has not only started to climb, it's only recovered the ground it's lost. It's actually above the point where it was at in both 1937 and 1929. In fact, we're looking at almost $100 billion gained over the 1929 level before the Depression started. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that this would basically puts the lie to the notion that the New Deal had nothing to do with the recovery, or that had some way extended the Great Depression. So we see now that it's not a fluke that the New Deal, that unemployment and GDP dropped when it did. When the New Deal was cut back, GDP fell and unemployment started to rise again. And when it was reinstated, the economy got better. So, another thing that JJR says, well, the Depression we didn't really recover on the Depression until the 50s because the market, Dow Jones average, hadn't recovered to 1929 until then. By that I say, so what? The Dow Jones average is not a very good measure of the economy. And besides, after 20 or 30, closer to about, say, 25 years or so of improvements, I doubt there was anyone around who really cared what happened in 1929, just as long as it kept going up. 25 years is more than long enough for the people from 1929 to write off, get their losses, or jump out of a building, whatever. And it's plenty of time for new investors to come into the market and make a bundle. So Dow Jones average does not mean a heck of a lot here. And that ends this particular glass of NeoCon Kool-Aid. The New Deal did indeed work. If you look at GDP and growth, it worked. If you look at unemployment, it worked. And that is what you tell a neocon when he insists that the New Deal didn't work. And while you're at it, you might want to also tell them that Bush-style tax cuts rarely ever work. One of the things that the New Deal did was raise taxes to the rich through the roof. To 88 to 90% was the highest tax rates. And what's more, those rates remained high throughout the 50s. It wasn't until the 60s when JFK came along and cut the upper tax rate to around 75%. And that's all she wrote for this episode of NeoCon Urban Mythbusters. Thanks for stopping by.